I want to welcome both of you to Washington Times Higher Ground. Mr. Vice President, let's start with the book here, Go Home for Dinner. Great title for a book. Why did you write this?
Billy, thanks. Thanks for having us on Higher Ground. And particular joy to be with you with my daughter, Charlotte Pence Bond, who co-wrote Go Home for Dinner with me. And most of the days that we worked in settings just like this one, she had her brand new baby, my perfect granddaughter, Etta Rose, on her lap. So she did a remarkable job. We've been heartened by the response. You know, a couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to do a 2-book deal with a major publisher named Simon and Schuster, and but when news of that came out, a close friend who I quote in the preface of Go Home for Dinner came up to me and he said, "You know, I'm very interested in reading your autobiography because I'm interested in government and history and politics. I'd like to know your story." But Billy, he said to me, "The book I really want to read is the one that explains how you have a family like yours living the life that you've lived." And I told him it was God's grace first, and I was humbled by what he said. But that's where Go Home for Dinner was born, because everything I've been able to do, anything I've ever been able to accomplish in public life, has only been a result of the support of my wife, my incredible and accomplished kids, and the fact that we always put faith and family first.
Yeah, I mean, putting faith and family first, a lot of people struggle with this in everyday life. And here you are, being in the positions you have been in. You would imagine it would be difficult to hold on to that. You know, I hear so many stories about devout people who they've started out well and they don't finish well because they get distracted or they go off course. What do you think for you has kept you on course in such a profound way?
Well, I do believe it all began with the decision that I made as a college student when I accepted Jesus Christ as my personal Lord and Savior. And while I learned many lessons along the way, and you can read my other book and learn about many of those early lessons. After my family came along, and after my co-writer there was maybe about 4 years old, I heard a great sermon that grounded me in the real calling of my life. I always thought my calling in my life was public service, and I had great opportunities to serve in the Congress and as a governor, and of course as vice president. But in 1978, I heard a sermon that preached on a verse in Genesis chapter 18, where God reflects on the fact that He had called Abraham, but He had called Abraham to, as the Bible says, to see to the members of his own household that they would do what is right and just, so that the Lord would fulfill His purpose for him. And when I heard a sermon on that in 1978 as a young father and as someone who had tried and failed in politics early on, it realigned my priorities. It wasn't that I gave up on my dreams of public service. It was just I felt a deep conviction grounded in my faith in Christ that said, here's where it has to begin. And all along the way, as we reflect on and Go Home for Dinner, Karen and I tried to make decisions, sometimes hard decisions, moving our family 18 different times to keep us together,
Wow.
asking my daughter when she was preparing to be a senior in high school to move back home to Indiana, and choices we've made along the way. But I hope in the book people smile a little bit. I hope they pick up a sense of humility from us, but I hope they also know that that the decisions that you make to put your family first will be an incredible blessing to your life. And I believe with deep conviction that when we make God's priorities our priorities, it's remarkable where He'll take us.
Absolutely. No, it's so true. And Charlotte, for you, you know, you've done a lot of projects with your family, working with your mom and your dad on books and being on the campaign trail over the years. For you, when you look at your upbringing and the ways in which your family and your parents did what they did, the way they did it, what inspires you most on your journey now that you have a child and you're building your family?
Yeah, it was really interesting writing this book with my dad when I had just had my first kid. I think that overall, I mean, it was also hard for me to take into account these things in the book and to practice those things. It was hard for me, even writing it. It was hard to put it down, spend time with my family, take care of my daughter. And I think that a lot of people can relate to that. I think, especially in our culture nowadays. I mean, we talk about this in the book. I mean, your work is all the time. It's readily available to you at any time. Your phone is your computer, and so you basically are always on call. So I think people in my generation, especially, and even younger and kind of Gen Z, are really seeing this too, where they're just never unplugged from work. And it does take a toll on the people around you. So we talk about that. I think my parents did a very good job of communicating that they, you know, wanted to be with us too, even when times when my dad couldn't. I mean, there were definitely times when he was not able to be, right, with us all the time. I mean, he wasn't home for dinner every single night because he was a member of Congress. So I think that the times when he wasn't, I knew he wanted to be. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that was kind of something I think I had to take into heart, even working on this book. Was I didn't want to be doing interviews like this and not have actually lived out the ideals that are in the book, or tried to live them out imperfectly. Um, and I think my parents just they emulated that very well, even before iPhones and, were such a distraction.
Yeah, no, I love your honesty there too, because it is so hard, but I think that that broader quest of trying to live these things out, and we're never going to do it perfectly,
Right.
but continuing to be on that path of making sure you come back to that table to be home for dinner as much as you can. Mr. Vice President, for you, I mean, gosh, you've had a crazy couple of years, and you've been in public life for a long time. I want to get back and talk a little bit more about family life, but what for you has been the biggest lesson in particular in the last year or two, maybe the toughest lesson that God has taught you?
Well, I think for me, and all through our life, we've sought to make our family and faith a priority. But as doors of opportunity open before us, and, serving in Washington D.C. in two capacities at both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue and here in Indiana, invariably there are detours, there are challenges, there are unexpected developments. There I had hoped to be most of the way through my third year of our second term of our administration at this point, and probably looking to the future myself. That was not to be. We just suspended a campaign for president. Felt very much called to run. I tell people the only thing that would have been harder is uh, if we hadn't tried. But I hope one of the things that is a comfort to people reading this book is that all along the way, um, when you make your marriage and your family a priority, that disappointments and detours in your life take their proper perspective.
Yeah.
There's a chapter in the book Charlotte and I wrote entitled "Stop Counting," in which I would often say to people, they'd say, "How are you doing?" When I replied, "Never better," they'd say, "Wow, things going great in your career." I said, "No, look, my wife loves me, my kids are healthy. I stopped counting after that." And
Mm.
so I think for me, as coming up short in a presidential campaign or not winning that second term of administration, all of those things are much easier to take in stride when what's most important in my life we've made most important.
That's so important, being able to keep the priorities in order. And again, we all get so lost in the mix of the pressures that we face. And I've often thought over the last couple of years about you and what you've gone through and the things that have happened. You appear to be always, from an outsider's perspective, to be very measured. You're very calm. And you think about the amount of pressure that I would imagine has been on you at different moments, 2020, obviously January 6th, all of these things that everybody has an opinion on, and you're sort of at the center of it, and you keep that peace about you. I think that's the word that I'm looking for here. Can you help people understand that peace and how you just are able to carry yourself in the way that you do, even in the midst of so much chaos?
Well, I have to tell you, I'd say two answers. Number one is I discovered to borrow a phrase, I discovered the secret of being content in any and every circumstance. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And making sure that I have regular devotional time, regular prayer time. My wife and I, over the last year, recently began to read the Bible and pray together every day. And that's been a very grounding thing for us as we move forward in our life. The second thing, though, is, and Charlotte wrote the last chapter of Go Home for Dinner. And the title of the chapter is simply Stay. And I could tell you that another secret of the perception of me that you had and that I've heard before has been the fact that my family has been there every step of the way. Even on that tumultuous day of January 6, 2021. A lot of people know that I refused to leave the Capitol, that I thought it was important that I stay at my post and that we finish our work that day after the violence was quelled, that we would reconvene, complete our work under the Constitution. But not as many people know that my wife, Karen, and my daughter, Charlotte, were with me at the Capitol that day, and they too refused to leave. And as Charlotte wrote very eloquently in that chapter, for which she wrote every word, they hewed to the principle of just staying together. And I can tell you that having my family with me through those tumultuous days was an enormous source of strength, of counsel, and whatever we've done as a family.
Yeah, and that cohesion, being together, it starts at the dinner table, right? It starts at forming that relationship and being with your family, and in those big moments, like what you just described, being able to just rely on one another. Charlotte, you wrote the last chapter in the book, and obviously this is an important project. It's dealing with faith and family, and this country is in such a chaotic place right now. What is your hope for the impact of the book once people finish that final chapter and put it down?
Yeah, I think that we really hoped that people would not just take these to heart and put them into practice, but that it would bring people closer together and kind of hopefully inspire people to get back to the dinner table figuratively and literally. We kind of talk about how the dinner table is the place where you learn to disagree with people too. You reconnect with your family, obviously, and it's a place to put your family first and share time together. But when you can't do that, and when you can't be there necessarily every night for dinner, finding ways to do that is really important. If it's just connecting on trips, or it's connecting, in car rides and, on the way to school, things like that, taking time to be with your family and put your family first. I do think that I hope at least that people can be encouraged by this book. We also wanted to include things in it that share that we're not a perfect family, that we, have also made mistakes. We also disagree with each other. And a lot of times over the dinner table, we had hard conversations. So this isn't just, a perfect little like Leave It to Beaver scene. It's definitely more real than that. And I just think that the dinner table is where I think Americans can start to relearn how to talk to each other and talk to people who they don't agree with.
Yeah. Well, and that brings me to my last question for you, Mr. Vice President, because Washington has always been a weird, strange place in a lot of ways. And yet right now the country is in such a precarious place. It feels like, and maybe I'm wrong about this, Washington is even stranger than normal. And when you look at it based on your experience and the time you've spent there, is there anything that disturbs you currently about where things stand, particularly with what Charlotte was just talking about, just the ability to sort of disagree and do it with grace, maybe?
We're at a time, I think our politics are more divided than any time in my lifetime. But Billy, I'm not convinced the American people are as divided as our politics. And one of the reasons I ran for president, because I thought we ought to have government as good as our people. By that I mean just a government that's that brings the values of faith and family and civility back into the public square. I will tell you though, I'm encouraged by what I see as a collective aspiration of people around the country in that regard. I think we're passing through a very difficult time. I hardly need to tell readers at the Washington Times about the failings of the current administration, the deep concern Americans feel about that. But I have to tell you, I have high regard for Speaker Mike Johnson, for the leadership in the Congress, for their commitment to hew to principle, but also to reflect a civility in the leadership that they're providing. That gives me confidence that we're going to find our way forward. Congress ultimately and government is ultimately, in many respects, a reflection of where the people are. I think the American people are ready to get back to what matters most. I think the reaction of this book has been very humbling to Charlotte and me. I mean, people around the country have been reaching out. Pastors, particularly around the country, have been taken by it. And as Charlotte just said very eloquently, we hope when people read this book, they smile a little bit. They don't think of the Pences as anything other than an average Christian family out there trying to make our way and do our best, however imperfectly. But that simple set of principles about putting your family first, beginning with going home for dinner, and going to that place where we do learn about where we come from, and we learn how to deal with people that don't agree with us on every individual thing. We think it's a part of how we move forward and heal our country, and we hope this book is a blessing in that regard. But I'm confident about the future. I'm an eternal optimist. I really believe the day is going to come, and come someday soon, when we all get back to what we know matters most, and we'll make the most difference, and we'll heal our land.
Well, I love that. And we're seeing it with the little mini revivals that are popping up all over the country. We're seeing people really coming into the truth more and more. And so I appreciate you both taking the time. The book is Go Home for Dinner. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having us on Higher Ground, Billy.
Yeah, thanks so much.